amount of property transferred to a specific individual and the relationship between the deceased and that person. If that person was a spouse, a child, or a blood relative, then in many of these countries, then that determines how much taxes due the foreign country. In America, it is an estate tax. It is levied on the gross estate. All of the property of the deceased is what determines the rate of tax, the amount of tax that is due. All right, so it's a basic distinction between the two. So here we're faced with a situation. As Congress went out the door for Christmas, they said, we'll be back. And Rangel and a few others, of course, bless his heart, you know, said, we will probably come back and we will pass retroactive legislation. All right, now there is a little history in America for tax legislation that has a retroactive effect. But it's widely debated right now whether or not it is constitutional, whether or not it would be supported by a Supreme Court task if, in fact, they decide next month to go and pass some legislation that actually goes back to the beginning of the year in terms of establishing an estate tax threshold of 3.5 million or something. We think Obama wants a 3.5 million, possibly $5 million threshold, so that everybody that's worth less than that figure at death would not have these obligations of doing the estate tax return and possibly paying any federal estate taxes. So that's where we stand. So all I can say is stay tuned, and the challenge to you is to really know in this area some of what rules will apply to you as these laws change, as they come into being. Now, one thing that I do want to point out, and this is the same vein of this same statement, the alternative minimum tax. I don't know if any of you have come into encounter with this, had to deal with it, whatever. But it is a lurking time bomb out there. The Congress did pass legislation extending, in that regard, a larger threshold of income before the alt-min tax comes into play. Now, what is it? Well, consider the alternative minimum tax as a second tax system. That if your income gets over a certain minimum amount, you have to do your taxes as you would under the normal rules, then you got to do them again under the alternative minimum tax rules. Why? Well, Congress felt, you know, way back that, gee, people are going to complain that, you know, the really rich get out there and they get these hotshot lawyers and tax accountants and whatever, and they end up paying no tax. Okay, and that again was a system that was prevalent prior to Reagan. And so the Congress said we can't allow that to happen. So people over a certain minimum amount of income, depending upon their filing status, they have to do the return, their taxes, compute their regular income tax liability under the normal rules of everyone else, but then they've got to go back and recompute it under alternative minimum tax rules. Now, what are those rules? Well, certain deductions don't get the same treatment under the alternative rules they do under the normal rules. What are those, for example? Well, state and local income taxes, real estate taxes, the miscellaneous kind of deductions you take on Schedule A that are subject to a 2% offset. All of those aren't considered in the alternative calculation. So it's possible that you got a U.S. tax liability here, let's say it's $25,000. Under the alternative rules, it's $30,000. You pay the $5,000 more. Now, why am I saying this? Because had Congress not acted to once again raise the minimum threshold for application of the alternative minimum tax, it's estimated 1/3 of all taxpayers, tax filers, would be subject to the alternative minimum tax. So Congress, you know, again, it's one of these things they really should do something permanent about, or one out of every 3 of you runs the risk of being subject to the alternative minimum tax. Now, we did win a battle with Congress on this, a number of years ago now, probably close to 10, in terms of foreign taxes. Up until that time, your foreign tax, you paid in your country of domicile, could only offset 90% of the alternative minimum tax liability. You had a 10%, it was double taxation. You paid taxes in France, Germany, wherever it may have been. When you came into the alternative minimum tax range, your foreign taxes were limited to 90%, could only offset 90% of the alternative minimum tax. This was scandalous. And Congress finally addressed it and said, okay, now it will cover the entire 100%. So that's not an issue as such. But still, real estate taxes, state and local income taxes, miscellaneous deductions, these things are not considered in the alternative calculation. And so it's something that you want to be aware of if you do your own taxes. I don't know how many people still do that, but that's, you know, that's almost a bygone thing itself. So you have the alternate tax. You have the question of the estate taxes as such. The interplay between the countries in which you live or have lived and the United States tax code. I think that somebody's going to be pointing out more and more as time goes on what I think is absolutely negligence on the part of the United States Treasury in the tax treaties that it has negotiated and ratified with other countries. Negligence because there is no reciprocity in those treaties. I would go so far as to say that we're probably 6 million Americans living abroad, all frauding the Internal Revenue Service. Now, how is that? Because I think every civilized country in the world offers those people who live in that country the chance to participate, invest, put money in plans that are not taxed by that local country. Okay, I'm from France. You've got the PEL, the CEL, the PEA, the Assurance Vie, very big issue in France. All of these, Livre A, all of these opportunities to put money into plans in France where, if you invest in it, they're not taxable by France. Okay, problem, the treaty doesn't grant reciprocity. You can work it the other way. You might be living here in Massachusetts and want to invest in municipal bonds here in Massachusetts, you know, to help build roads, the hospitals, the Congressman was talking about, all of those things, not taxable on the U.S. return. But it's quite likely that they would be taxable in the country where you live. See, no reciprocity. Major negligence on the part of the Treasury. So, because of the lack of that, you don't have any tax credits specifically on that investment abroad because you don't pay any tax on a lot of these, PEL, Assurance Vie again, but they would be taxable in the United States. And that is the real hot topic issue, because Uncle Sam has become very, very interested in each of us. All right, very interested. And he's going to get more interested as time goes along in the computerization and the obligations of foreign countries, as I'll explain. Is going to give him an opportunity, or her, if you want, Uncle Sam, calling him, to get more information on you as we go along. Now, why? Well, let's put some of the blame really where it, I think, rightly should reside. And let's say that UBS, Union Bank Swiss, really went beyond the norm, sending people into the United States to seek investors, people who would put their money in UBS in plans that almost patently were contrary to American tax law. I mean, they were soliciting business, you know, from people with a really understanding, you know, that this would not be disclosed to the U.S. government, that they could put money there and forget about it and whatever. And the IRS got wind of this and, you know, attacked UBS specifically as a bank, levied a major fine, $780 million, then went after the list of all the clients. You may know now that UBS is in the process right now of turning over the names of some 4,600 clients of the bank itself. So the IRS is going further from that. I mean, they've taken this as a real issue. It's kind of like, I think, blood in the mouth. They're going forward now, and they're trying to find all of the Americans who have accounts in foreign countries and whether or not they're declaring that income to the United States government. It's really, I think, a shame because, again, I think most of us living abroad, okay, we've taken advantage probably of those foreign investment plans, never in mind, you know, that, well, I mean, so I'm not declaring it to the United States. Why should I? I live in the foreign country, and they offer this to me as an opportunity to shelter some income from for my retirement or for the future, whatever it may be. But the legal rules of it say that the Internal Revenue Service is not bound to accept the foreign treatment of that income. They apply their own rules to it, and in many cases that leads to it being taxed by the United States, and no foreign tax credit because you don't pay tax in any other country on that kind of income. Now, one of the forerunners of all this was an idea that came to fruition with the Internal Revenue Service about 15 years ago. And we had our one and only International Tax Conference in London with the Internal Revenue Service. some 15 years ago. And tax preparers came from all over Europe and all. And